What is going on, everybody? This is Mean Dean and the Outsiders podcast coming straight to you from ClickPod Inc., the fam. Here to present to you Mean Dean's A through Z pay-per-view review. Now, we are still on the A's. We are still on Armageddon. We have about 6 Armageddons left to cover before we get to the B's, but I am super excited for the B's. We have Bash at the Beach, Barely Legal, Backlash, all these things that we'll be able to cover here in the near future. But I'm glad you're here with me today. Today, the A stands for Armageddon 2003. Now, this was a very linear type Armageddon. By that, I mean it was subjective in sometimes the way that you would see the other Armageddons. There's a lot going on, a lot of promos, a lot of stuff like that. Really, this one was match after match after match. There's about 8 matches in here, which was also great to see because it kind of gave you the same feel as what you'd see today. But it also had some great nuances and things in there that we'll discuss. Before I get into that, please don't forget to check out YouTube, Mr. JG's Monday Night Raw and Tuesday Night SmackDown Live reviews, as well as my future Mean Dean A through Z pay-per-view reviews. Can't wait to get into more of them. We got thousands left. We'll be doing this for the next 2 years probably, but I'm glad you're going to be with me for the ride. Again, check out Podomatic.com, ClickPod, of course. iTunes is tied to that, and our Patreon's also tied to that as well. So any support whatsoever, we totally appreciate. We want to get the fans involved, get you guys more up-to-date content, and the more we have to allocate to that, the better off the fans will be. So let's go ahead and jump into the first match here. This one was Mark Henry versus Booker T. Now, before I get into this match, one of the things I want to bring up, and it's something that I noticed through the match, so Mark Henry was really, really agile. Booker T is really, really agile. And you don't really think about that with these guys. When you think Book, yeah, you got the spin-a-rooney, you get the missile drop kick, Northern Lights, things like that. So Book, I totally get. But man, Mark Henry was dropping bombs, and it wasn't just fists. He was doing a great job keeping up with Booker T. And this was a lot of outside the ring work, inside the ring work. So it was a decent match to start out without going back to the Raw and SmackDown to figure out exactly where the storyline brought them to. You know, like I said, Mark Henry usually comes out pretty strong. He is the world's strongest man. Dominating Book outside, really. I mean, that was the big start to it. But man, Book hit this nasty springboard to the outside. It was really cool to see, especially a big guy like Book. I mean, he towers right up there with Mark Henry. He's just not as big. You know, people forget how agile they are. So that's why I wanted to bring some light to that and shed some light to that. But also, one of the things that Mark Henry did, which I thought was really cool, was Booker T was sitting on the second rope, essentially. His top of the body was laying across the second rope. And Mark Henry ran through and slid through the ropes, putting all of his body weight on Booker T. Great move. I like that move from Mark Henry. I think that was awesome. Totally played into the pain angle. And then I started to wonder, like, why did Mark Henry never get a good title run? You know what I mean? Because, and I'm not going to say this, I'm going to put it out there. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put it out there. I'm not going to say this as in this is a for sure thing. Mark Henry never got the title run he deserved. I really don't think Booker T got the title run he deserved after WWE. I would say the biggest problem with that was that WWE, in a lot of people's opinion, does not push black talent. Hate to say that. That's what it looks like. They really don't push their talent that's of other race. So seeing Jinder win and now seeing Nakamura and Asuka have big runs, it's great. It's totally great. I think that brings a lot of diversity. However, we still have great black African-American talent that could get the job done and carry the company. So I want to see more of that. The only issue in this one, because there was a lot of wear down offense, a lot of defense from Booker T, it was pretty much Mark Henry's show. You know, Mark went to go do this powerbomb and almost ended up like a whack jackknife, essentially. And that was really the end of the match. He just botched a powerbomb. But you know, Book, before he could get to the end of the match, before Mark Henry could get that pin, Book's hitting spin-a-roonies, he's hitting the axe kick. Winner, Booker T. Like I said, pretty decent match. Now, this was a Raw pay-per-view back then. This was when the brand split first happened after WCW came on. They figured out what they wanted to do. So naturally, they go back, and Bischoff is talking about how he's not happy with the results. Eric Bischoff from WCW, now WWE GM, And he starts talking to Chris Jericho and Christian, or some people know him as Christian Cage. He also talks about his peeps. I love talking about the TO peeps. Hashtag that shit. And this is around the time where they started doing more of the tag team thing, which was decent. But really the buildup was having to fight Trish and Lita later on in the pay-per-view, which I will get to. It was very interesting. You could tell Chris had something on his mind. He wanted to say something, and definitely Bischoff was distracted by that. All of a sudden, whose music hits? Mick Foley. Show Foley going to the ring. So Foley comes back and says he's with a suit and tie. He comes out and says, the petition to bring back Stone Cold Steve Austin as GM, or at that time, I believe it was Sheriff. It was a petition that they had to bring Stone Cold back. Essentially, had a million votes or something like that, which was great, and everybody cheered. And then Mick Foley said, to celebrate, let's bring out this person. Stacy Keibler comes out in a cheerleader outfit. Great. Who doesn't love Stacy Keibler, but it didn't make a lot of sense to me. All of a sudden, Randy Orton, Evolution Randy Orton, interrupts Mick Foley. Now, this is after Backlash 2003, where Mick Foley and Randy Orton had their big knockdown, drag-out, hardcore match. It was pretty insane. Then all of a sudden, Randy Orton's saying no disrespect, Mick Foley, so on and so forth, but he wants his Intercontinental title. Mick Foley takes his top off, sports coat, whatever you want to call it, and he has a ref shirt on. Well, then RVD comes out. Boom, we move right into match 2. RVD versus Randy Orton for the IC title. Strange way to start the match, albeit this was shortly after Mick Foley stopped being GM, and this is when Stone Cold and Eric Bischoff were kind of trading off a little bit. This, by far, was the best match of the night. Honestly, I have to say, Randy Orton versus RVD. And really, when you look at Randy Orton now, you're thinking Hall of Famer, hands down, no problem. Lots of titles, lots of great moments. But you forget about how good Randy Orton was when he was just a pompous ass. And that's what made him great, was when he was the legend killer. Man, I was super impressed by Randy Orton versus RVD. So obviously RVD's dominating a lot of early holds, a lot of early punches and clotheslines, but man, RVD with the aerial offense totally on. Doing monkey flips over the top rope, doing all of his rolling thunder. It was really cool to see, especially since you haven't seen RVD around for a long time. He is still the whole fucking show. I truly believe that, RVD. So if you hear this, whole fucking show, RVD, always. And then Orton starts pushing RVD into the barricade and really starting to rough him up. There's a part where RVD gets up on the top rope and Randy Orton pushes RVD off the top rope, goes all the way to the ground, hits his face on the barricade. Great spot, great looking. Of course RVD does it flawlessly. He's not hurt. He's a badass. Orton starts bending the rules a little bit to get Foley riled up. And then Flair comes out and Flair's into it. So Flair's throwing his distraction in from an Evolution standpoint. Randy hits this nasty gut wrench overhead neck drop. It was crazy looking. It was really cool. Of course, what would an RVD match be without putting your opponent on the barricade and doing this flipping leg drop all the way to the ground? It was insane. I love that move. That's one of my favorite moves of all time. Super unique. Love RVD. Can't say it enough. Again, I say early Randy Orton. This is when pulling somebody through the middle ropes and hitting him with a DDT was rough. And everybody who has seen RVD matches knows RVD takes DDTs like a fucking boss. And he did on that one. And everybody oohed and awed after he hit that nasty mid-rope DDT. Flair attempts to interfere again. Of course, he is Flair, dirtiest player in the game. But our Randy Orton gets the RKO off the distraction. So there you think the match is over. It's not. He rolls out, a little scuffle, another RKO, boom, RVD's down. Randy Orton, new champion. Now, fun fact, this was Randy Orton's very first title ever in WWE. So that's how early it is. Match number 3, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Trish Stratus and Lita versus Chris Jericho and Christian. Now, the build-up to this was quite simply that Jericho and Christian had a bet to see who could bang the other person quickest. Jericho with Trish, Christian with Lita, totally played to their vulnerabilities. Christian, being the total big asshole that he is, was super into it. Jericho actually started falling for Trish Stratus. That's the story. So really when they started, and mind you, this is 2 women tag teaming versus 2 men. When they started, it was very like, okay, we'll see how this goes. If they're playing more into a storyline version of the match, I totally get that. That's fine. But if Christian and Jericho come out and just start beating the shit out of these girls, then I don't know how that plays out, from a fan perspective. What's the payoff? And in fact, I'm pretty sure I wrote that note down too. So Trish immediately tries to crossbody Jericho, and he catches her, and he's telling her to calm down, calm down, calm down. And bends her over his knee and starts spanking her. So wherever he was feeling some emotion, it didn't play out through those spanks. That was interesting and demeaning, right? Lita throws just stiff shots to Christian. I mean, they're hitting too. So it's super cool to see. But the men are mostly dominating this match. Christian's pushing Trish down on her ass, almost across the ring. They're hitting these women with hard clotheslines. I mean, it's sometimes tough to watch because of how good Lita and Trish are. They're Hall of Famers, and to see them go down like this, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. I didn't see the payoff there. And it kind of made me feel a little bit uncomfortable, some of the shots they were giving Trish and Lita, because it just didn't feel right. Like, it wasn't a balanced attack where you got some hold offense in, you got some aerial offense in, things like that, and Lita and Trish are dominating the punching game. That sort of makes more sense to me. And then Jericho just kept playing like he didn't want to fight, but he did. He did. He totally fought. At one point, Christian ripped Lita's shirt off, threw it to Jericho, and Jericho smelled it. So you got to pick a side, buddy. You're the GOAT, man. You can't do both sides during a match. You're the GOAT. Get better. Of course, who's the winner? Christian and Jericho basically brutalized Trish and Lita. I just don't see how that would have helped their career, to be honest. Storyline's cool. I totally get the storyline. But at this point, these are 2 badass chicks who can just come out and beat your ass. Well, they didn't do any of that, unfortunately. Match number 4, Batista versus Shawn Michaels. Now, Shawn Michaels having some storylines with Triple H. This is a lead-up to WrestleMania 20. So Shawn Michaels is already in the Evolution storyline, trying to battle with other guys, Batista, Randy Orton, Triple H, of course, Ric Flair. But really, it wasn't a good match. And one of the notes that I have in here for this is that, quote, hard to say any Shawn Michaels matches are boring, but this one is, end quote. And that sucks, man. It sucks to see a boring Shawn Michaels match, because most of them aren't. So I'd like to see Batista and Shawn at some other point, maybe once I'm going through the pay-per-views, but just with more depth, more reason, and just an overall better match. One thing that you always love with Shawn Michaels matches, gotta love the way he hits those comeback sweet chin musics. Gotta love the way he hits those comeback super kicks. They're always awesome. He always lands on the guy after he kicks him in the most awkward way, and that's how you get the pin. Winner, Shawn Michaels. Moving on to the next match. Now, this next match was a little interesting. For those of you who remember Tough Enough, the very first Tough Enough winner, a guy named Maven. Maven also eliminated The Undertaker in the Royal Rumble. First Royal Rumble ever. So it's Maven versus Matt Hardy version 1. Now, we all know Matt Hardy as the Woken Matt Hardy, or Broken Matt Hardy, or the Hardy Boys. This is Matt Hardy version 1, where he's just a super ass. Every time he comes out, he has little factoids about him. It's actually a pretty good shtick. But they don't really get the match started. Batista comes back after losing to Shawn Michaels, destroys Maven. And then they say that the condition that Maven's in, he cannot compete anymore. So Hardy pulls the refs out anyway. He's like, no way this is happening. Pins Maven himself. And Matt Hardy is the winner of a match that not only he wrestled, he also reffed in. Next match, I'm also seeing a theme with tag teams at Armageddon, that they're not very good tag team matches. So this one's Tag Team Turmoil. 6 tag teams. Every time one gets pinned, the next tag team comes in, and so forth, and so forth. So we started out with La Resistance and Hurricane and Rosie. Hurricane being Shane Helms, Rosie being a part of the 3-minute warning. La Resistance I hate. I've never liked any of those guys. Hurricane early goes do some springboard Jericho move and just botches the fuck out of it. So much so that he almost injured himself in the process with nobody around him. Gotta love Hurricane. That didn't work out. Pretty quickly, though, La Resistance was taken care of, essentially. Hurricane and Rosie won that first fall. Immediately, Mark Jindrak, I'd say Jindrak, that's what they called him, Jindrak and Cade, or Lance Cade, Mark Jindrak, came out. It was Hurricane and Rosie versus Jindrak and Cade. Jindrak didn't even waste time. He just rolled Hurricane up real quick, put him out of his misery. That was it. They didn't even last. Then Lance Storm and Val Venus came out to face Jindrak and Cade. That was a little bit longer of a match, but it was just so basic and boring. And this is at the time where Lance Storm had absolutely no identity. He was just rolling with all of Val Venus's bitches. So it was just really boring. Val Venus made pretty quick work at Jindrak and Cade. All of a sudden, the Dudleys arrive. The Dudleys are facing Lance Storm and Val Venus. Dudleys pretty much roughed those guys up, but Bubba looked pretty hurt. He looked like his arm was hurt. It was a decent, I don't know, it was decent. I can't really say much more than that. I'm not going to force myself to talk about something I don't really care about. But they do end up picking up the win. And then Test and Scott Steiner came out as a tag team. Now, Scott Steiner, largest arms in the world. He's a freak. Holler if you hear me. And Test, RIP. Actually, in fact, Test and Cade both no longer with us. Another fact. You know, and this was a weird one to the point where no 3D was hit. Just a lot of limb focusing on Bubba Ray's arm. It happens. Sometimes that could get very boring. Bubba hit the Bubba Bomb out of nowhere, and all of a sudden Devon covered. They're still the tag team champions. However, before the match could end, Bischoff comes out and says there's one more team to compete. And sure as shit, it's Batista and Ric Flair. So he got there and just basically destroy the Dudleys. And now they're new tag team champs. So not only did Randy Orton win his first IC title, first title ever, in Evolution, Batista and Ric Flair now win the tag team titles. Match number 7, Molly Holly versus Ivory for the women's title. My only notes are nothing to report. I'm not impressed with Ivory. I'm not impressed with Molly Holly. I know Ivory's going to the Hall of Fame. Great for her. Total respect. I just don't like their game. And it was hard to have people like that when your comparisons are Trish Stratus and Lita. Sorry. The talent pool wasn't super deep at the time. Match number 8 and the final match, Triple H versus the champion Goldberg versus Kane. World title on the line. Triple H, this is like, I call it Fat Triple H, because this is around the time where I think Triple H was starting to beef up a little bit for some reason, gain more mass, but he just ended up looking fat. I'm a fat guy, so I could say that. It's cool. Don't report anything. Triple H spits on Goldberg, first of all, which is awesome. Then Triple H and Kane doing a number on Goldberg. Triple H somehow finds a fucking chair and just blasts Kane. And this is also the Kane, not masked Kane, but just after he took the mask off and became like a pyromaniac, started lighting shit on fire. They find their way outside. Natch. Rough choke slam from Kane to Goldberg on the table. The table didn't even budge. Goldberg just slid off, which all of us have seen that in person. We all know that that shit would probably hurt really bad. So Kane and Triple H make their way up the ramp, and this is around the time where the ramp was solid steel. So then Kane chokeslams Triple H on the ramp, and it looked rough. But eventually they all start to make their way back to the ring. Goldberg off to the side, Kane and Triple H on the ramp. And Goldberg just hits a nasty spear on Kane. The one thing, though, which is really funny in this match is that Triple H was poking everybody's eyes. It was actually really funny. Just thumb to the eye to everybody. It was like he wanted to be Ric Flair that night. Boom, thumb to the eye. Boom, thumb to the eye. That was his only defense. In fact, that wasn't even just a defensive move. That was an offensive move at one point. So if you go back, watch it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Who else but Flair would come down and fucking interfere in the match? That was his role back then in Evolution. Gets a distraction, Kane chokeslams Goldberg. Batista now interferes and gets Triple H the pin. Triple H, new World Heavyweight Champion. Evolution reigns. That's the end of Armageddon 2003. Before I let you guys go, Armageddon 2004 and 5 will be out shortly. Please check it out on YouTube, Podomatic, iTunes. Patreon will be up soon. Please donate. Please listen to the Outsiders Podcast. We are the best wrestling podcast today. This is Mean Dean for Mean Dean's A to Z pay-per-view review. I'm done.